People made fun of me for being a Power Rangers fan back then. Huh. Well, look who's laughing now. Everyone. Oh, okay. Power Rangers is the latest film based on the extremely cheesy, but amazing, children's TV show from the 90s that's surprisingly still going on today. 5 very different teenagers cross paths when they find these magical coins that give them these superhuman abilities, and eventually the ability to morph into a Power Ranger. After they're recruited, they're trained by Zordon and Alpha 5 to fight against Rita Repulsa, an evil woman looking for the Zeo Crystal hidden beneath their little hometown of Angel Grove, so she can use its power to create and destroy worlds. It's not cheesy, I swear. Listen. Merely saying I just grew up with Power Rangers would be an extreme understatement. I was, and still am, a superfan. I went and dressed up as the Red Lightspeed Rescue Ranger one year for Halloween, and I still have my Morpher from Time Force. I have the VHS movies, the clothes, the bedspread, and oh man, the toys. So many toys. Needless to say, this was one of my most anticipated movies of this year, and man did I hope they wouldn't screw it up. And you know what? Overall, I think they did a good job. First off, I'm really glad that Lionsgate actually poured some money into this and took it seriously. The production value is there, and you can tell that some serious thought was put into making this movie for new and old audiences. Now, I try to judge this primarily as its own standalone film, but there are just too many allusions to the original material that would make that entirely possible. The CGI overall in this film is fine, but there are some spots where it really stands out and just looks awful, but not to the point where it ruins anything. The new suits are great and have a nice blend with the old suits and this new practical design. I do wish the new helmets were a little bit more reminiscent of the original ones with their designated animals, mainly because they still have the Zords that are still representing those animals. You can tell the helmets have that subtle design, but I wish it was just a little bit more prominent. Without there being a clear connection between the Rangers and their Zords, there really isn't a justifiable reason why they're representing these animals. The original had their animals on their morphers and their coins and also on their helmets, but they also represented their personality in a sense. Here, not so much. The cast as a whole is good. All of the Rangers have really great chemistry with one another, and all of them are likable to a certain degree. But I would be lying if I said all of them gave good performances. All of the performances are passable, but RJ Cyler as Billy the Blue Ranger stole the show as I expected him to. The Blue Ranger was my favorite in the original series, and he's my favorite now. What a coincidence. From the first moment that I saw RJ Cyler and meet Earl and the Dying Girl as well as Vice Principals, I was impressed, and I knew he'd be getting a lot more work. But also, he's the only Ranger that's even remotely reminiscent of the original character, but with his own welcome touches. And I actually love that they decided to make Billy autistic. It's a character trait that I never would have thought of that fit really well. But I gotta say, I did end up getting a little annoyed with his excessive clap throughout the movie. At first it's funny, but then it just becomes phony. The weakest Ranger acting-wise would be Ludi Lin as the Black Ranger, in my opinion. I found his character to be wildly inconsistent and annoying at times, but honestly, I feel like a lot of the performance issues in this movie just stem from the bad writing to begin with. Becky G as Trini the Yellow Ranger is largely forgettable, and Naomi Scott as Kimberly the Pink Ranger is fine. They both are nothing like their original characters whatsoever, but they're fine and they both have their moments to shine at some point. Dacre Montgomery as Jason, the Red Ranger, was also fine. But as someone who graduated from the Western Australian Academy of Performing Arts, which is this really incredible and exclusive acting school that even Hugh Jackman went to, for those of you who don't know, I expected more. Mainly, his character doesn't really fit the mold of a leader. I understand the direction that they were trying to go, where all the kids finally have something to fight for and better themselves, but they really didn't establish this well in the long 2 hours that they had. Now, I did enjoy what they tried to do with the characters as a whole. I appreciated how they tried to give all of them meaningful backstories and tie in their lives at home and at school, but it really felt like they didn't know how to do this with 5 people at once. And I also love how they at least tried to make some effort to get them all to connect with each other on a deeper level, specifically the campfire scene, regardless of how on-the-nose things are said. There's actually a moment in that scene where Kimberly has to be skipped over when they're all opening up because she doesn't want to open up at that very moment, but she'll do it in the future. But then she never does. She only does to the Red Ranger. Just kind of bothered me. But overall, the characters were grounded and were a nice counterbalance to all of the crazy over-the-top stuff later on. Speaking of over-the-top, Elizabeth Banks as Rita Repulsa was awful. Just awful. But again, I feel like this was only partially her fault. The lines she had to work with were just cringeworthy. Her character and motivation just don't make any sense and aren't given enough backstory. I loved how they decided to reveal that Rita was the original Green Ranger that went bad, and thus giving us this betrayal angle that we've seen before, but makes the long-standing history of the Power Rangers more rich. The biggest issue with this movie was that it couldn't decide whether it was trying to be this new age, gritty, realistic action flick, or if it was trying to emulate that cheesy, over-the-top goodness from the original show. Rita is ridiculously over-the-top, while the Rangers, despite being blaring archetypes and still having their cheesy moments here and there, are far more believable. A lot of these aspects just didn't blend with the overall tone of the movie. You can't have these semi-visceral fight sequences with the characters acting like the original Rangers, saying stuff like, "Whoa, watch out," and then having emphasized grunts like, "Huh, ha." There's not a lot of it, but it's noticeable and extremely cheesy. Bryan Cranston as Zordon, as expected, was great. Far more aggressive than I was anticipating, but good nonetheless. Bill Hader as Alpha 5 was also great. I felt like they needed to modify his voice a little bit more though, maybe make it more high-pitched, since I did think it sounded a little bit too much like Bill Hader himself. I was originally really skeptical about Alpha's new design, but it was actually pretty cool to see him in action with his extendo arms and whatnot. But I gotta say, it was a pretty piss-poor attempt at the iconic ay, but it was just to throw fans a bone, so it's no big deal. The action in this film is almost non-existent. The Rangers don't morph until the final third of the movie, so you don't actually get to see all of that great Power Ranger choreography that you're expecting. The small amount of Power Ranger action that we get is actually good, but I do feel like they should have given us more time with them in their suits going through trials and errors as actual Power Rangers. Since most of the movie is character development, it does drag on quite a bit until the change of pace in the final act. Speaking of that, I greatly appreciated the fan service and Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the movie. Many of them are subtle, and then some of them, such as blatantly playing the original Power Rangers theme song when the Zords mobilize, are not so subtle. And unfortunately, the not so subtle nods actually contribute to the clash of tones throughout the film. There's even the quintessential Power Ranger shot where you see the massive monster that usually forms at the end of every episode slowly walking towards the city to cause destruction. And I gotta be honest, seeing that shot made me more giddy than a 7-year-old schoolgirl. And I don't care how cheesy it was. As a fan, it was awesome. That brings us to the Zords, and man are they cool, and I love how they get wired in through their suits. But I don't really know how these teenagers are instantly able to maneuver these massive pieces of machinery without any training. Sure, there are some hiccups here and there, but it still doesn't make any sense. It also didn't make any sense how none of them, despite there being 2 weeks of training, knew that they were able to form the Megazord. That's kind of an important footnote that needs to be emphasized more in the instruction manual when there are giant monsters destroying cities out there. Regardless, it was great to see them in action despite how cheesy it was. But I will say that this movie gave me something that I didn't even know I needed. Seeing a Megazord German suplex a monster made of gold. That shit was awesome. Guys, this movie did a lot of things that were awesome, a lot of things that were fine, and a lot of things that were just outright terrible. This is one of the most conflicting movies I've ever seen as a fan. I want to love every minute of this reincarnation of my childhood, but as a lover and protector and advocate of good film, I can't be completely blinded. For all these reasons, I'm going to give Power Rangers a 7 out of 10. Okay, as a standalone movie, this is definitely a 6 out of 10. But as a diehard fan, 7 out of 10. 100%. So there it is, guys. Power Rangers. Have you seen it? Let me know what you thought about it in the comment section below. And while you're at it, let me know what your favorite Power Rangers series is. Mine, without a question, is Power Rangers in Space. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is my number 2. And then it's a tie for number 3 between Lightspeed Rescue and Time Force. And as always, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. It truly does mean a lot. If you like this video, don't forget to hit like. And if you want to stick around and watch some more movie reviews, hey, hit subscribe. We'll catch you in the next one.